Raylan knew what to do in the case of a fire because fireman Josh attends their school and shows them exactly what to do when a fire happens. September 13th, we awoke at 1:30 a.m. to our daughter coming into our room, telling us that our home was on fire and that she was going to get her brother and meet us outside. She did just that. I got the dogs, and Kyle, my husband, was able to put the flames out, and shortly, minutes after, Rural Fire 1 showed up, and they were able to get all of the remaining smoldering boards and trusses out. Dan Babcox later told me that if they hadn't gotten there when they did, the whole roof of our home would have engulfed in flames and ultimately been a total loss. So for them to show up and be there in the timely manner that they were and save my home, that is immeasurable to my family and I. We had just purchased the home not even 2 months prior to the fire, and it's our dream home, and they saved it and completely got us to where we can live there and we could stay there that night and we weren't misplaced, and having 2 young kids, that was really important to me.
The residents of Park County currently benefit from a fairly high level of service across all the emergency services. There'll be a vote on the emergency services mill levy in June of this year. It's a great opportunity for the entire community to be able to participate in what I think is one of the best forms of self-governance there is. It's a choice to fund what level of service you want. In this case, the funding is to make sure that we maintain the proper level of service of all the EMS across the entire county. It includes federal contingency funds or PILT funds, the 911 dispatch center, the possible addition of a Missouri River Task Force drug officer, the Livingston ambulance service, which covers a large portion of the county, Rural 1 Fire Department, the volunteer ambulance and fire departments throughout the rest of the county, and the sheriff's office. There's been an increase in Park County for the demand for emergency services. The pressure comes from a lot of different sources. We have an aging population which require more emergency services. Our tourist population has increased, and additionally, the population of both Livingston and Park County has increased over the past few years. Those pressures are starting to require greater emergency service presence, and we're going to have to be able to fund that presence. But an important part of it is that funding is static. The state of Montana limits the rate at which taxes go up to half the rate of inflation. So if you have static funding and growing costs, you end up with a funding gap, and that's what we're currently facing.
Dispatch is the initial point of contact for people who have an emergency. Some call us the first responders. We take the essential information so that people can get the services they need. We also do a lot of work to support our crews as they're responding to the incidents and providing the services that people have called for. We have 1 to 2 people per shift at this time. We strive to have 2 people per shift just to cover call volume. However, given our current staffing, that's not always possible. In the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen an increase in calls for service, a lot of that due to cell phone usage, accidents, fires, that sort of thing. We used to get 1 or 2 calls from home phones, and now everybody that passes can call it in. With those kind of call loads, we can quickly become near overload with call volume, and that's really led to a need for additional staffing. If we had an additional dispatcher, we would be able to ensure double coverage, 2 people on shift at any given time, which helps with maintaining function during heavy call periods. We wouldn't get the call overload as quickly. The center is open 24/7, 365. This room is never ever empty. There is always somebody here listening for the phone and listening for the radio.
At Park and Rural Fire, we have quite a few pieces of apparatus and equipment that we use to respond to any emergency that happens within the county. One thing we are encountering lately is that a lot of our equipment is aging. Prime example is going to be our structure truck, which is 18 years old, and that's out of the recommended life cycle of a apparatus for a structure fire department. And that is our primary truck that runs on rescue calls and fire calls. And that is costing us about $10,000 a year right now to maintain, which is far more than any apparatus should cost a fire department. It's bleeding us dry, really. If we can't keep up with the rising cost of operation, then we would have to see some sort of dip in our ability to provide the services that we currently provide. The ISO rating is really important to your insurance staying low, and we'd love to see it stay that way. An ISO rating is a rating put out by insurance agencies to help them figure out what you're going to pay in insurance premiums. By lowering the ISO rating, your premiums on your insurance is going to go down. If we can't keep up with the level of maintenance costs and the different pieces of equipment that we will have to replace to keep our responders safe, our ISO rating will likely increase, which would cost you more in your insurance premiums.
If the mill levy passes, we're planning on replacing ambulances as well as cardiac monitors.
Having a four-wheel drive ambulance in the winter months in Montana is pretty much a must. Without it, we even have trouble getting around the city streets within the city limits of Livingston, not to mention those calls in the county where a lot of times those roads won't get plowed for a few days.
Our biggest cost is overtime. Because we're so busy, we have a lot of overtime expenses associated with our services.
In the last 2 years alone, our call volume has increased 27.5%, and it just keeps going up from there. We are having multiple calls at a time, and part of the challenge is staffing multiple calls when they start coming in at 2 and 3 at a time. Every one of our employees is working overtime every month, and some a lot more than others, just to keep this place staffed during emergencies. The passing of the mill levy will ensure that we can continue the same quality of service that we're providing to the community currently.
We deal with obviously criminal activity, traffic crime, and keeping the community safe by law enforcement and/or education. We do search and rescue. Some of them are just a medical call in which we can help with resources to get to someone to be able to give them medical attention. It's just a very broad activity that we have.
The wear and tear on our vehicles is unbelievable. It can take you from one end of the county, north of Wilsaw, all the way to Cook City. With licensed sirens, it's not uncommon to be 2.5 to 3 hours to respond that far. The equipment provided by the Park County Sheriff's Office is good, but we are using it tenfold. It is not uncommon to put 600 miles on a car in one shift. Then it is a lot of burden on the vehicles and the equipment. I've been here just about 5 years next month. The call volume level has increased, but I have noticed significantly that the violent crimes have increased a ton. With our extended response time due to this large county, trying to get there and keep those situations under control is getting harder and harder. We try to back up our other deputies depending on where we're coming from, but we could be at opposite ends of the county. 2,800 square miles, large call volume, and low manpower. It really puts a strain on it.
If we could get more manpower on, would increase our ability to respond to calls in a quicker fashion. It would make the county safer, it would make the actual officers, deputies on patrol safer.
Drug crimes in the county and the city have definitely been on the rise in the past several years. Started off small stuff when I started here 20 years ago. It was a lot of marijuana, a little bit of meth. Now there's a lot of meth and heroin and cocaine and all that. If this mill levy passes, what it'll do is we'll have an additional officer that we can devote to the Missouri River Drug Task Force, and who will focus on drug crimes and drug activity within the city of Livingston Park County. The Missouri River Drug Task Force, what it is it's a group of counties around the area who work together, focusing primarily on drug crimes. Drug crimes and drug cases are very time intensive, a lot of investigation and a lot of resources. And by having an additional person, it frees up our other officers for the everyday calls that are not drug related. If the mill levy doesn't pass, it'll put more pressure on the lone sheriff's deputy that we have now, who is tasked with investigating all drug crime and activity within the Park County.
The current proposal for the mill levy is a 10-year, $1.5 million a year mill levy. So it does sunset at the end of 10 years, but per year it is $1.5 million. Now that's spread across multiple agencies It's going to cover multiple costs, from personnel costs to capital improvements, replacement of vehicles, replacement of radios. So it's a pretty broad and wide-ranging mill levy that affects a lot of the services that people use or have the potential to use each day. The mill levy is a textbook example of self-governance. It really is up to the community to decide what level of services they want from the government. You can look at emergency services as something that you want the Cadillac version of, which we don't have, but we have a really good version, or you can have the bare bones, and that really is up to people to decide. The mill levy is how they do that. If they want to fund the current level of services, then you support the mill levy. If you're willing to take a reduction in services, that is a valid choice that you'll have to decide, can you live with the consequences of that? And that really is the goal of this video, is to show what are the consequences of choosing it, what are the consequences of not choosing it, because it really does come down to individual choice, and then the choice as a community as a whole on who do we want to be and what kind of services do we want to fund. If you need more information on the mill levy, please go to our website and check out the information that we've provided for you there. We'd really love you to dig down in the details and really see what we're doing with the money and how it supports you. We're here to make sure that you can make this decision based on the best information that we can provide.